Welcome in to the PFF podcast. Steve Palazzolo is here with Zac Robinson because it is QB day. It's all about our in-depth quarterback breakdowns today, what used to be known as the Big Time Throwcast, and our Tuesday tradition. Zac, how you doing this week?
Doing good, man. Another good week. Another good week of QB play. Shoot, we're getting down to I can't believe how fast the season's gone here. We're just a couple weeks left, but overall pretty solid QB week.
Yeah, week 15 in the books, and Sam and I did our actually this week talking about receiving running backs and how it's, everybody likes to say December and January football is all about running the ball and all this stuff, but it's really not. This game is still a pass-first league. It's a passing game, and it's all about the quarterbacks and moving the chains through the air. So that's what we enjoy here. So let's get into it. We had a great question on Twitter that I think was relevant and spurred some of our conversation for today. The question was essentially, and this is why I really wanted to get your thoughts on this, Zac, referencing Tom Brady and the Patriots going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers and how they've had pretty consistent success in that matchup. The other example that was used was Phillip Rivers going up against the Kansas City Chiefs and how they've really struggled in that matchup. There are a few other examples through the years. I think Russell Wilson has kind of had some struggles in division play. Yeah, so it really works for the quarterbacks that are good, where they find struggles just against certain matchups, or one that is as lopsided as Brady and his passing numbers when going up against Pittsburgh. So high level and big picture, what would you chalk some of this stuff up to before we'll dive into a little bit of what actually was going on in some of these games? But high level, what do you think would be the reason for some of this?
Yeah, I mean, every game has its own entity, but there's also, the schematics and just the players, style and overall how they see the game or for Tom Brady, we've talked about he's the greatest zone coverage quarterback player that we've ever really seen. He just knows exactly where that's at. He can see space and deliver it accurately. So when you talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are there's two different types of zone coverages. So you got a match style, which basically has man techniques, and you've got a more of a vision spot drop zone team, and that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers are. They've been like that for a very long time. So that's why you see Tom Brady go out and he's able to see these soft zones over and over. He knows where to go with the ball before the snap, and he can just play in rhythm and confidently. So there is just, that element of how it meshes up with the quarterback's strengths versus, the weaknesses of that defense. So that defense is also really big on, we're going to make you earn this thing up and down the field. We don't think you're going to be disciplined enough to take it underneath, take the check down, and you're going to get undisciplined, try to take a shot over our head, and we end up with a pick. Well, obviously we know Tom Brady's one of the most disciplined QBs to ever play. So the styles, how they match up, and Phillip Rivers with Kansas City, they play a lot of cover one against them. If Rivers isn't exactly pinpoint with his throws, he can struggle. So it is crazy just week to week how it can change for QBs just based on the philosophy of the whole team and what they're facing against, and the just the overall schemes of it make it a lot of fun to follow.
I do feel like familiarity can work both ways too. There's a lot of division games, I think, where the game is tighter than it's expected a lot of the times because the defense, even if they're overmatched on paper, they just the familiarity with the offense and the quarterback, they find ways. And I think there's an element to that with maybe Kansas City going up against Rivers, and Kansas City with the same thing with Derek Carr the last couple of years. Aside from maybe one outing, they've really had Carr's number. Going back to Brady and Pittsburgh, you gave me this very QB jargony explanation. I was asking you about a pass protection against Pittsburgh the other day where, actually, you know what it was? I think it was Joe Flacco screwed up a protection, and you gave me the answer. QB jargony way of saying, how do you set your protection against Pittsburgh? Can you just, I don't care if it's over the head of some of our listeners. I just want to hear it again. What were you saying?
Yeah, there's a certain front that the Steelers show, and I got to give all the credit. Ken Zampese, who was offense coordinator with the Bengals last year and the start of this year, he was a protection Nazi. I mean, we had to know the ins and outs of every division opponent, all that stuff. So all this stuff comes from him and my time being around him and Andy Dalton in that QB room. But, there's a certain front that the Steelers show that if the safety's down to that side, that's where the blitz is coming 100% of the time almost. So there was a play like that, and it seemed like a play where Flacco should have known, hey, the protection's coming this way. This is where I'm weak. I need to fix it. And that was just one of the plays that he missed. But there's so much consistency with that Steelers system year in and year out. A guy like Tom Brady has seen all these blitzes. He's seen every single type of look that teams have thrown at him. So it's obviously really hard to get him.
Yeah, so my whole thought on this was, if you know this, Zach, if you know how to set the protection against the Steelers front, and if you know how to attack them, imagine what Brady knows, being so much better than you and, more familiar with their schemes and all that stuff,
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, that's why he's the best. I mean, he can know, he knows all that stuff. He can, he can recall something from 2007 that, a different blitz that the Giants brought on 3rd and 7, in the third quarter. And it's an unbelievable ability to just recall plays like that. And that's what makes him the best.
So coming into this game, and actually coming into the AFC Championship last year, we broke down this game, we analyzed it, and we said, what are the Steelers going to do? Are they going to roll with their same exact scheme that they've always seemed to throw at New England? Or are they going to change it up? And we now have the numbers to back it up. I think Tony Romo did a fantastic job of highlighting it on the broadcast. They did play more man coverage. They did completely change schematically what they did. Not completely, but percentage-wise, it was a pretty big change. What was different in this matchup with Pittsburgh and New England? What did they do differently defensively?
Yeah, like Romo was stating on the broadcast, was a lot of cover one, man-to-man. They had to do that. You knew that coming into this game, they were either going to try to match up their zones, which they're not very good at right now, or they were going to play more cover one, and that's what they did. Now, the way that they did their cover one, I mean, it's great that they did that, but not having true doubles on Gronkowski, especially later on in the game. They had the safety in the middle of the field, like everything was all balanced up. They were playing man-to-man, and that was all great, but to not have some element of double on Gronk throughout the game, obviously it killed them in the end.
Yeah, so you definitely saw a lot more man coverage, and even though it wasn't, like you said, they seem a little out of place. You're talking about a team that plays 12% man coverage. Multiply that by 5 in this game. 5 times as much man coverage as they're used to playing, essentially. And maybe they're not as nimble or flexible as some other teams when they play man coverage. But from a game script, game flow standpoint, I think this was exactly what Pittsburgh intended to do. The offense, they had 2 plays or 2 drives of 7 or 8 minutes, 7-minute drives, 8-minute drives. They controlled the ball. They kept the defense off the field. They kept the game close. And then they at least, even if they weren't doubling Gronk or really, play into their strengths the way they should have, a lot of the throws that Brady had to complete to Gronk were tight window throws. So there is this element of, if you're going to make them beat you, at least make you beat them with tight window throws. Even though Sean Davis has no chance to cover Gronk, most of them are tight window throws, and you're at least challenging the offense throw for throw there. So on one hand, Sam and I talked about this yesterday, it's almost encouraging for Pittsburgh that they were able to employ this strategy and nearly win the game. A lot of people think that they should have won the game, of course, with that call at the end of the game. Versus Pittsburgh, New England's perspective could be we took their best shot. We took their new game plan and still found a way to win. So I still think we end up seeing these teams again in the AFC, but I still think it's fascinating that a team that plays so much zone did at least try to play man. They did try to switch it up, but Brady to Gronk was just too good in this one.
Yeah, no, you got it. You got to love that they completely flipped the script, did that. They were able to generate more pressure. They on cover one plays, they generated 44 pressure 44% of the time. So they were able to, like everybody always says, you got to disrupt them at the line of scrimmage, throw off their timing. They did that. It was just it was discouraging seeing how they played the end of the game and how they could have changed it, because I mean, if at the end of the game, if you're going to let or I guess he was out, but if you're going to let one of their other guys go off, Brandon Cooks, let him go off and make him win on the outside with timing routes. But the fact that their safety location was just kind of playing neutral and in between and not basically pretending like there wasn't a Rob Gronkowski on one side and no shade to him, I thought was very, very odd. And, they made him pay in the end.
Yeah, maybe that is the next step, though, for Pittsburgh. If they do play again,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, we're going to play man coverage, but, okay, now we do need to focus on Gronk a little bit more. That is one thing the New England defense does really well is, you could play man across the board, but it's what do you do with the extra player or two if you're playing cover one? Do you shade? Do you throw? There's a lot of teams against New England that are just like, forget the deep ball. We're going to take our two extra players and just flood the middle. And like you said, make the Brandon Cooks, type receivers separate on the outside, which 2 weeks ago against Miami wasn't happening. You didn't have Cooks separating all that well. Right. So maybe that is the next step for Pittsburgh. More man again the next time they play, but do a better job with your extra players, flood the middle of the field, flood, Gronk and the seam and all, the places where Brady and Gronk really killed them.
I agree. Just a true in and out. You watch the Patriots when they are truly doubling a guy, they're playing in and out coverage on him, making, this guy's got the outside, the other guy's funneling down to play the inside, and truly taking away one guy unless you just are going to throw one up to him. So that'd be good to see. Maybe they need to just toss on the Pats film of how they are doing stuff in cover one to take away some of these opponents, but. Like you said earlier, though, you got to like the way that they did it and the game flow went exactly how they wanted to. Just didn't work out in the end.
Real quick, I want to touch on a couple things that we talked about last year just to refresh, because I thought the question was fantastic about certain matchups playing well or against, guys' strengths and weaknesses. One example last year, I mentioned Derek Carr going up against Kansas City, even Trevor Siemian going up against Kansas City. Anything in those matchups where you're just like, hey, this is a good matchup for this quarterback versus this team, or it's a bad matchup. There is some we've talked about the last couple of years that I think just to you they just made sense before we went into the game, and then you go into the game and you were kind of right on as far as where the result was.
Yeah, Kansas City does a great job just against Oakland because they know we're going to take away his two top dogs, and they play a true, on true passing downs. They're playing a lot of man-to-man with actual just doubles on both Crabtree and Amari Cooper, making you win down the middle. They got Jared Cook this year. That's helped a little bit, but in years past it was who's the other guy that can win, and they think that Derek Carr isn't going to have enough poise in the pocket to hang in there, find that next guy. And 5-man rushes and those types of things that can kind of just get him a little jittery in the pocket and force to go to the other guys. But that's definitely one that comes to mind. The Rivers versus Kansas City one this year was bad. It was a lot of man coverage. We saw just Marcus Peters making play after play, but
Peters he is just a turnover machine. Forced fumbles, interceptions. He knows how to find the football.
Yeah, he's a stud. So yeah, it's and sometimes it can go the complete opposite way because the quarterback just flat out comes out and throws the ball in pinpoint spots up and down the field. So that's what makes the game great. I mean, you think that one week it matches up perfect, the next week like Matt Ryan we saw Sunday night. You think playing Tampa Bay, a bunch of zones. He knows these, basic zone concepts.
Usually carves them up when he faces these basic zones. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's, it looks great on paper a lot of times, and then the execution design just, obviously is not there at times.
The other one that you nailed last year, we were talking about Dak. It was week 14. He goes up against the New York Giants, has his worst game as a pro in PFF grades, missing throws left and right. The Giants defense did a fantastic job of making him make tight window throws, but even when he had open throws, he was missing them. He was off. And you said next week at Tampa Bay, don't worry about it. It's a perfect matchup for him. He'll be fine. And he goes out and 34 for 38 completions?
He
Something
went off
ridiculous.
that game.
32 for 36. He completes 89% of his passes. against Tampa Bay's zone defense, which you just knew
It,
going in. You're like, hey, that's
it
going to be a
was
good
like
fit
a
for him.
7-on-7 game for him. Yeah, he just he matched up really. He's a great zone player, like Tom Brady. He's got a good feel and can process those really well. So yeah, that was a big time game for him last year. Man, I can't believe how many passes he completed.
Yeah, I love it. So good discussion, and it's the types of stuff that we like to break down here, and a good question from Twitter this week. I want to move on to one of the hottest quarterbacks in the NFL right now, on one of the best teams in the NFL, the playoff-bound Jacksonville Jaguars. Blake Bortles is throwing the ball extremely well. He's making good decisions. I'm going to throw a stat at you first, Zach, and then you can explain to me exactly why this is the case. Because Bortles has been an interception machine, it seems, in his first few years in the league. Our turnover-worthy play percentage numbers: year 1 as a rookie, he was 30th in the NFL. Year 2 in 2015, he was 41st. That's 41st worst. That's worse. That's the high, at the high end of turnover-worthy plays. That was the year that he had 36 touchdowns. Last year, he was actually only 20th in turnover-worthy plays. But this year, he is 6th best in the league at actually taking care of the football. This is Blake Bortles. He used to be the butt of jokes when it came to interceptions.
Yeah.
This year, he has 8 total interceptions, but even that, probably not. It's not completely indicative of how well he's taking care of the football. What is the difference this year with Blake, especially these last few weeks?
Gosh, yeah, great stat going all the way back to his rookie year. I mean, that's what it is, and taking care of the football, it's coming down to he's checking it down. I mean, as simple as it is he's playing in rhythm, he's throwing the ball more accurately. His fundamentals and his loopy motion and kind of rigid motion, it is better. I mean, you can tell that he's worked just religiously on it, the footwork and those types of things. But the biggest thing, the turnover-worthy plays, they're not there because he is, if it's a play-action call and they're trying to take a shot, he's not trying to force anything down. He knows exactly where his check down is. He's checking it down, getting the ball out of his hands, and just moving on. Obviously, the running game, the defense, all that stuff's flowing together. But, gosh, in terms of just playing the game and just taking what's there, he's doing a great job.
Is it as simple as that? 2015 was the year. Just to recap his career real quick. Rough rookie season in 2014. 2015, statistically, he's outstanding. Fantasy owners absolutely loved him because I think it was 35 touchdowns that he had. But also everybody made fun of him because they all happened in garbage time and all that fun stuff. And there was some truth to that. But overall, he did throw the ball well as far as getting the ball down the field. Him and Allen Robinson had great chemistry, made a ton of plays deep down the field. But again, that was the year that he was 41st in turnover-worthy plays. And I think a lot of that was because they're just playing from behind and chucking the ball up. But last year, 69.2 grade, not great, one of the worst QBs in the league. And now this year, currently ranked 13th at 81.9. So that's his flow. It was two below average years, with a 2015 that was a little bit of just gunslingery and garbage time led as far as the stats go. And now he's in this game manager mode. How much of that is just because they've got probably the best defense in the NFL? They've tried to run the ball a ton. They won a game earlier this year where he threw the ball only 14 times. They have worked extra hard to protect him. Is it that simple when you have a guy that's on that gunslinger, end of the spectrum, that you can reel him back in if you do control all of these pieces around him?
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard to go in, and I guess personal example is with Pete Carroll in Seattle. Everything's about the ball. Whether you're on defense, we're going to take away the ball. We're going to take care of the football on offense, and it can almost get into the QB's mind too much to where you're not able to just free up and play. And I think that was the case. It seemed like a little bit through stretches this year where you're watching Bortles and it's just everything in him's telling him to take this shot. But the mental battle of, hey, just check, don't take a risk here. I got a good defense, running it, all that stuff. And that kind of inhibited him, and he was playing a little slow. But now it's like he gets it, and the confidence is through the roof right now. You can tell just the way he's moving in the pocket and the poise that he's playing with. So it may have taken some time to get him feeling like that, and he's still, has his ups and downs. But gosh, it's overall, that ingraining him and just getting him to see that big picture of how this thing's going to go and know that he doesn't have to take some of these risks and he can check it down to guys, I think has gone a long way. And last week, hitting the deep shots down the field was the story. I mean, he was so accurate down the field on some of those throws that it was incredible to watch.
Yeah, so he's been, just looking more comfortable. Some of the red zone throws that he's made, I think the scheme's been really nice in Jacksonville too. Some of the ways they've schemed open some receivers a bit. You like the schemes there? How do you think they're calling plays and working with Bortles and his skill set there?
No, you're right. I mean, you said it. I think even before that, you said they do a great job of just finding open holes in the zone, but then they do a great job on third down of just bunching up the receivers, getting good concepts going. They see a lot of man-to-man coverage because teams don't think Blake Bortles is going to accurately throw the ball over and over and over, and he's been able to prove them wrong. But a lot of it is, the scheme's good. They're bunching up the receivers. They're doing a lot of different things to get clean reads and just keep him in rhythm is the biggest thing. Let him take three with one hitch and let it go. And keep him within the script and on rhythm through the game.
I like it. Now, we've talked up a few quarterbacks here that have been really hot, over 3, 4, 5 week stretches, and then they kind of taper off. Matt Ryan, we talked up how he was on this great 4 or 5 week stretch, and then he hit some struggles. Phillip Rivers, the same thing this past weekend, kind of reverted back to YOLO Phillip Rivers against Kansas City. So we'll see if Blake can keep it up, but I keep coming back to that. This team reminds me a little bit of the Mark Sanchez-led Jets, though Bortles right now playing better than Sanchez did back in the day. But the expectations were so low for the quarterback position, but the defense was capable of going out and winning games. I think that's still where Jacksonville is, but maybe it's time to raise expectations a little bit because they've managed him. He's improved, and like I said, taking care of the ball, and they're going to be in every game with a great defense.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great comparison. I think, he could not be in a better place. The team's obviously winning, but just from a confidence standpoint and him leading in the playoffs with, this upward trajectory, maybe if he has a bad game here and there, but he's got these last few to look back on. That's been pretty recent to have, some good confidence going into the playoffs.
He's another guy that's potentially a part of this entire quarterback carousel. 5th-year option coming up with the Jags. Do the Jags move on at the end of the year? I think just as recently as 5 or 6 weeks ago, it seemed like the Jags would be a great landing spot for maybe an Alex Smith or a Tyrod Taylor or guys that are in that game manager type of place, as quarterbacks historically. And now Bortles is getting himself there. So let's see if he could stay there. Is my big question. Let's see if he can continue to take care of the ball and work off of what they have surrounding talent-wise. All right, the one other guy I wanted to talk about because I saw one throw, Zach. I saw one throw, and I was like, that is MVP Cam right there. That is 2015 MVP Cam Newton. It was actually a couple throws against the Green Bay Packers. 2015, when I think back of that season to Cam Newton, that was the one complete anomaly to his career. He is generally just a good, not great quarterback as far as PFF grades as far as throw for throw. He is graded every single year between 76 and 84. That is just consistently good. That's where he is. 2015, he was a 90.1. You can get all these grades as part of PFF Edge over at ProFootballFocus.com. But in that season, in 2015, I felt like he could just close his eyes, throw the ball as hard as he could, and was making tight window throws left and right with more velocity than I think anyone in the NFL. And he had 2 throws against Green Bay that were similar. One up the seam that got knocked away in the end zone. Another one, a post route that did get caught for a touchdown, where it was just confidence. I'm seeing it. I'm feeling it. I'm just going to throw it as hard as I can. And I'm going to put it perfectly right where I want it. I loved it. I haven't seen too much of that from Cam this season. What did you see from him and Green Bay and that entire offense?
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Those throws were just different type of level of velocity that many guys can throw with. But, I think, overall, he gets Greg Olsen back. It looks like they're kind of, at least last week, things are kind of flowing offensively how they probably wanted at the beginning of the season if everybody was healthy. So, they got great design going on with Olsen and McCaffrey, putting those guys on the same side, putting them on opposite sides, and making one guy the primary, but the next guy crossing into the pattern as the secondary read. So it's all kind of meshing. Last week was a great example of just what they can be week to week if everything's flowing together and Cam's throwing with that that accuracy and that velocity up the seam. Man, I mean they're tough to stop, but the comeback route to Christian McCaffrey was awesome. He was flanked out a receiver. It ran a true comeback route, and the anticipation that Cam threw with, you could just tell he's got a great feel for just that guy. Obviously, he does with Olsen, but something you saw out of that, you're like, shoot, he just feels good with where that guy's going to be in that spot, and he can let it go with the anticipation. Because we talk about all the time, he's not a very anticipatory thrower and those types of things, but seeing some of that stuff is obviously a big positive.
Yeah, he'll sit in the pocket just stuck there so much, almost inviting the rush, and then making a play with bodies around him, trying to make a throw with bodies around him. He suckered me in at times throughout this season. His first 3 games, well below average. Almost could chalk it up to a little bit of rust. He had a preseason injury, didn't play, and then he had 2 great games against New England and Detroit. Did he turn a corner? Not really. His next 4 games, all below average PFF grades, did not throw the ball well. Had a game against Miami where he seemed to maybe figure it out. Against the Jets, he was terrible. So it has been a roller coaster. Now we're in this stretch of the last 3 weeks or so have been pretty good if you add them all up. Against New Orleans, against Minnesota, last week against Green Bay. You have Greg Olsen, back, like you said, just a guy, anytime he's healthy, they do such a good job of finding ways to isolate him and put defenses in a bind. You put him on the same side as McCaffrey, and you just kind of double the issues there. What are we going to see going forward from Cam? Is Olsen in the offense just a way is that going to settle him down now? Will we get more out of the short passing game that they've tried to implement this year? Sam and I talked about just unleash him, let him make these 100-mile-an-hour throws down the field, and more good's going to happen than bad over time. What do you see from the future of this Carolina pass game now?
Yeah, I think with how it's set up right now, it's got to be just like last week. They're not flipping the field a whole lot with deep bombs down the field like we've seen from Cam. Throwing posts over guys' heads. I mean, they just haven't happened as much. So
right, don't have Ted Ginn with that 4.3 speed getting behind the D anymore.
Last year, the Oakland throw sticks in my mind from last year where he threw it about 70 yards from flat feet in the pocket, just dropped it over the defense's head. Those haven't been as much. Instead, it's the seam work and underneath, and he's still making the tight throws, but they're in just kind of a different location of the field and not always over the top of the defense. So if that's the way that he can do it and do it with consistency like we saw last week, then shoot, this offense is going to be in New Orleans game as well. He played pretty well throughout that game. So, he's trending in the right direction since, I guess, week 10 Miami game. Had a bad game against the Jets, but has been pretty solid throughout. And that seems to be the way that they're going to do this thing is more, controlled and sustained in drives and those types of things.
Yeah, the criticism I've always had of Cam in this whole move with Carolina is that he's not a great short area thrower. But a couple throws stood out to me, man. He had a little swing screen in the flat. He reset because a guy was in the passing lane, kind of threw it off balance, hit McCaffrey in stride, hit a little 5-yard out to McCaffrey, put it on the front number. You don't see those passes all the time from Cam. If you could do that a little bit more consistently, then you start to maximize what they're trying to do in the short game. You have Olsen with the intermediate game, and you have the confident Cam able to make the tight window zip throws. That's when they're all at their best. So, look, I'm looking for Cam consistency because I've been caught up in the roller coaster. Right now, I think it's at a high. These last 3 weeks have been pretty solid. So, see if they can keep it up because they're right in the middle of that crazy deep NFC right now. Let's fly through some of the good and the bad from around the league. We had Jameis Winston, speaking of roller coasters, I compared him to Eli Manning when he came out of college, from the roller coaster type of angle, from this inconsistency, from a throw standpoint, the big plays, the turnover worthy plays. But this was good Jameis on Monday night against the Falcons.
Yeah, hey, both of those guys, Jameis and Eli, same week, both solid games. But he was good throughout. I mean, just everybody saw he played a pretty clean game, worked the pocket really well, and then the tight coverage throws, he left him in a spot where just his guys can make the play. Some of them were, the defender outside leverage. He leaves it kind of low and away in a good spot. So that was great, Jameis. We've seen what he can do. It's now just stringing those together where there's no games with pocket fumbles and turnover-worthy throws down the field, late in the down. Some of those plays you don't like to see, but this was a great game and pretty clean throughout.
Last week we talked about Carson Wentz, him going down with injury, what Nick Foles would mean to that Philadelphia offense, and then during the week, one of your first messages to me was, man, Foles looked really good, made a lot of nice plays.
He was good. Yeah, he was solid throughout the red zone throws we talked about, the one to Alshon Jeffrey in the back of the end zone.
Loved that throw.
He made some pinpoint,
beautiful,
tight coverage throws that we talked about last week. It was like, hey, can he make these tight throws that Wentz has been fitting in there? And he did, and he played well in the moved around the pocket. The RPO game is not really in the cards. I think they ran maybe one or two this game, but without that, they've got more. They run more of their true drop back pass system that they don't typically do. They do with Wentz, but they can just do more of those with Foles since they're taking that out of the game plan. But it was good. We'll see if he can sustain this type of play.
All right, let's look at the bad, and let me start with Aaron Rodgers. It's tough to completely criticize the guy. He's coming off of like 10 weeks off or whatever it was, but first 3 interception games since 2009. I described these passes as passes that he normally attempts and makes that are big-time throws, but he left them a little bit short. I may have called it, I don't know that it was necessarily physical, but you definitely watched him and said, something's off here with Rodgers this week.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of both, man. The physical, just like you said, left some of those throws short, and I think just mentally, just the fear, maybe not the fear, but just knowing that, it is pretty fresh. If there was something else to happen, all the talks that have been through the weeks that, hey, this thing isn't completely healed, that had to creep into his mind at times in the pocket, and maybe a little quick to take off where he would extend the play, whether it's within the pocket or extend it out just a little bit. So that was different. The Carolina game plan was, they came after him. They basically said, after the first drive, we're going to play 5-man fronts. We're going to bring 5 every single time. I think they ended up blitzing him over 30 times on his 50 or so dropbacks. So they were not going to let him just get any type of comfort back there, and could tell, that's the kind of game it's going to be.
Rodgers, his season is now done. He's been placed on IR now that the Packers have been eliminated from the playoffs. An uncharacteristic season for him, even though this last game was a part of it. But he finishes now currently sitting 22nd in the league at avoiding turnover-worthy throws. That's usually one of his strengths, and nearly a 1-to-1 ratio with big-time throws to turnover-worthy throws. Those are numbers where your best quarterbacks are 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and Rodgers historically in that 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 range. So even before the injury, it was a little bit uncharacteristic of a season, and of course, tough to hold this game completely against him, but not the same guy that we've been seeing. One other guy, Derek Carr, the stats were not horrible, but aided by what should have been a game-ending interception against Dallas, a bad misread, and then he had the dreaded fumble out of the end zone when you're trying to score, which of course you lose your firstborn child and the football when that happens per NFL rules, so you don't do that. But yeah, Carr had some chances to win the game for the Raiders, and it did not go well.
Yeah, it did not. There were some throws throughout the game that were okay, and it's just been up and down year for him. We've kind of talked about him last year, how great he was playing, and just the whole swagger and confidence that he was playing with last year has not quite been there. Could it be injury related? That could be the case, but it's just the overall kind of poise in the pocket and just hanging in there and making throws. His passer rating on throws over 2.6 seconds kind of show a good number there. He's very low on that, and he's completing 44% of his passes on throws over 2.6 seconds, which is last in the NFL. So some of that stuff is kind of a good indicator of he's just not playing with a whole lot of poise and confidence like we saw last year.
Yeah, I think the 2.6 second cutoff is a great way to just break down a guy. The guys that are making plays later in the down, there's a combination of reasons why, but is it that inability to get to the last read? Is it guys not getting open? Is it mechanics? Is it an inability to extend the play? It feels like probably a combination of a lot of things for Carr, right? When it comes to that number, 44.8% completions, as you said.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And we've talked about their play action passing game. You get some of those play action passes on the longer developing plays. Those plays aren't there for him this year. So, he'll be fine. He's still a great player. He's just got to get that stuff cleaned up, get the running game going again, and just kind of regroup.
Yep, Oakland fifth lowest play action percentage in the league. We've been begging them, use a little bit more play action, free things up for Carr. We'll see if they can make the adjustments down the stretch or perhaps next season. All right, man, that'll do it for this week, our quarterback breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Always hit us up with some feedback on Twitter. I'm at PFF_Steve, and he is at Zac_Robinson5. Always like to hear what you guys think of the show, what you want to hear more of. And you guys helped spark some of this today with the suggestion, hey, let's talk about quarterbacks having success or really struggling against certain teams. And I thought that led to a pretty good discussion. Of course, if you're looking for some of the grades and the stats that we pulled off, it's all at profootballfocus.com. PFF Edge and Elite are the two products that you guys can find. You can use the promo code PFF10 to get $10 off any of the packages, whether it's Edge, Elite, or Elite Monthly. So go ahead and check that out. We're going to try to get back with a somewhat timely podcast next week, I think, Zach. We'll try to maybe do it on Wednesday, push it back a day due to Christmas. Everything will be pushed back a little bit. But listen in to the other PFF podcasts. We'll give you the exact rundown in the schedule for Christmas week. For those celebrating Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Zach, and we'll be back here next week. Thanks,
Sounds
buddy.
good. We'll see you guys.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk next week.